Hashtag You're It. I'm Amanda Malcolm, and you're listening to You're It Girl, a podcast focused on you and what propels you. Because that past, it does not define you. Your time is now, and you're it, girl. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to You're It Girl. We are here today with an industry friend of mine. Her name is Crystle Mulzet, and she is going to tell you a little bit about herself. And you don't have to look at the camera. So some of you, if you're listening to this in the car, I do record this as well. So you can always watch it on YouTube. But just introduce us. Let us know a little bit about yourself, what you do, your family.
Oh, loaded question. Well, first of all, thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, so excited. Crystle Mulzet, me in a nutshell, I've been in the real estate space for 7 years. Before that, I managed sales teams and tech startups for 12 years. And Amanda and I met that way. I have 2 kids that keep me very busy in different ways. I have a 12-year-old and a 3-year-old.
She is the cutest.
We've exchanged stories. She's very free-spirited, and I just can't wait to see what she does in this world.
Yeah, me either.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. I saw a meme the other day that said, "I don't have a favorite child, but if the police come, You'll know who they're." And I related a lot to that. I have an amazing husband that helps me hold all of that down. And I think we're similar in the sense that any chance I get, and most of why I work so hard is so that we can invest in real estate and travel. Yes. If I'm not working, I am, with my family, investing in real estate or traveling.
We were actually just talking about that prior to starting, just the importance of investing in real estate. We don't want to get off on that tangent on the show because it's not what it's about, but we geek out on that together.
Totally.
We just came from a meeting, actually. Both of us were at the same meeting.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I think we were passionate about it. I think we've both been single moms at different points. And there's no other way that I could have accumulated wealth coming from where I come from without real estate as a vehicle for that. So it organically comes up in conversation.
Yes, certainly does. Absolutely. Absolutely. And you and I share a similar background in a sense. So some difficult things to talk about today. And I know you've done so much work with both of these things that we're going to talk about. But when I had first launched this podcast, you had said prior to us starting this show today that you knew at some point that you were going to be on it because we share similar stories about our moms. And your mom, my mom, I no longer have a relationship with. And when we met, was it last week that we met for coffee to talk a little bit about this? You actually helped me with a couple of the things that you said because I've never been in a situation where my mom has not been involved in my life. I've always kept her in sort of this container with boundaries around it until finally it was at a point where I just couldn't any longer. And I know you had that experience and now you're in a completely different spot because, of course, your mom passed away as well from this disease, really. So just share a little bit about your childhood and what that was like. Because she was sober. She was sober for a while. She drank when she were young. When you were young, and then she was sober, and then she started drinking again, right?
Yeah. So growing up, my conscious knowledge of my mom, I want to give her credit where it's due because she got sober when I was 2. Part of what led up to her getting sober was me kind of walking around the house by myself at 2 because she would be passed out or those kinds of things. And obviously these are just stories because I don't have any conscious memory of them. But growing up, what I do remember was a lot of AA type stuff, I knew my mom had a sponsor and we went to these meetings and that kind of thing. And then, as I progressed into teenage years, I realized my house was the one that didn't have any alcohol in it,
Sure.
But I was sure throwing parties at it anyway. But that was, ironically, she was a bartender
My mom as well.
During the whole time. So she was a sober bartender. And I think that really started our relationship kind of fractured because I didn't have, I've listened to what you've shared, like the exposure to some of the things that you had, because during the week I was at school, my mom was sober, and then my mom would bartend on the weekend. So I would go to a babysitter every weekend. So I was kind of hyper independent of that relationship from a young age. But my mom had 3 kids. She was doing it by herself, and she truly did the best she could in that container until
hospitality is such an interesting career. And my mom, a lot of my family's in hospitality, and I was too. But then once I had my daughter, similar to what you're saying, I was like, oh my gosh, you can make a good amount of money in that career, short hours. Mm-hmm. And so you can be a single mom or don't have to be a single mom, but it's a career in which you can make a good amount of money putting in a short amount of hours, and you can raise your family that way, but it's always nights and it's always weekends.
Yep. And she would sleep all day,
right?
On the weekend. So I look back because I've kind of examined myself, like, is there something wrong with me that I didn't ever really have this relationship because she wasn't in her disease at that point.
Right.
It was just a matter of like, I was being raised by babysitters for the most part. Mm-hmm. And that was a way for her to make quick cash money for 3 kids. I get it. I totally understand it. It was just a byproduct of the circumstance that we were raised in.
Sure. And so then when did that change? She was sober for how long?
My mom was sober for 14 years.
It's a long time.
So it was not a short stint at that. And I think I was 16 or 17 the first time we were at a dinner. And I noticed my mom had ordered something that wasn't like a Diet Coke or whatever, and put it together. And it wasn't a problem like that second, Mm-hmm. She had started dating somebody that kind of, swept her off her feet, and, she didn't have to bartend anymore, and thought now that she was fancy, she could, have some drinks.
I was going to ask, did something change? Was there a change where she went from not drinking to then suddenly drinking again, and it was meeting somebody?
Yeah, and her situation normalized. I think, she didn't have the responsibility she had because he was supporting her in all financial aspects. Selfishly, it was kind of fun because, he bought her a car, so I got her old car, but I think the drinking was going on undercover for years. And at that point, I'm 16 or 17, and I've got my own stuff going on.
Of course.
So, I think we talked about this last week.
Yes.
My brother and sister really got the brunt of that shift in the household. What I got, on the other hand, was the disease of alcoholism.
Sure. What's the age difference between the 3 of you?
So my brother's 3 years younger than me, and then my sister is 9 years younger than me.
Okay, so you're 16, 17 years old. Mm-hmm. You're deep into high school and doing all of the fun things that entails. And you have younger siblings at home.
Yeah. And I think I have a lot of guilt there for I didn't realize what I was, I don't think we're conscious. I think we all think we're very grown up at 16.
Yes, we do.
And in hindsight, I don't know that I was grown up until I was in my mid 30s, to be fair. But, looking back, I can see where my siblings feel like I abandoned them because I was just on my own path with my own agenda, kind of with that jumping off place of being hyper independent to begin with.
Right. Right. We talked about that a little bit too. We share that. I also have guilt surrounding that. Even though there were times where I came in and was rescuing them, I still feel like they were stuck. They were stuck there, and we didn't have to be stuck there.
Right.
We could get a phone call or go do something to try to fix a situation really quick. But they were so young. They were stuck in that environment. I feel you on that. Even though my sister said this to me. She said, Amanda, you were a child. You were a child. We were babies, but you were a child as well. What were you supposed to do? And also, that wasn't your responsibility, even though we feel like It was.
Right. Yeah. We put a lot on ourselves that way. We also chatted about this. We were both 16 years old, not living in our house of origin.
Right.
I moved out when I was barely 16 years old and, started a life and was dating the guy that was 12 years older than me.
Oh, yes, that's right. I forgot about this conversation. So your mom starts dating this person. She starts drinking. Your younger siblings are in the house. You are in high school, and then you meet or you're introduced, right?
Yeah.
To this, we won't call, he's not a boy. I was going to say you're introduced to a boy. He's a man.
Yes, he was a man. So key event in between there, I think that, I've done enough therapy at this point to be aware of like the key major trigger events.
Yes.
So my dad, that was never really involved, like very, very inconsistent at best, was kind of called to discipline us, and that was about it. And then he'd be off. He was married 5 times. So he got cancer and passed away. So I think that there was all kinds of angsty, mourning a relationship I never had, mourning the little bit of relationship
no one's talking to you about it.
So I don't think it's a mistake on my part that I went from my dad dying at 15 to meeting and dating somebody 12 years older than me. In that short span, like I can see what I was doing.
Correlation.
At the time. What he was doing, I'm not sure.
Yeah, we talked about that.
That's another.
What was he doing? We're not sure.
Yeah.
So what transpired in that relationship?
Oh, so much. I think our parents, again, we've done this work, so I know that they were doing the best that they could. And the women in my family truly believe that, and truly taught us that if you find somebody that financially takes care of you, like,
you'll be okay.
That's
You're
it.
good.
You've arrived.
Yes.
Like that is the goal.
This is your number one goal in life.
Yes, this is the goal. So we had been family friends for a long time, and I later found this out that my grandmother kind of orchestrated this whole accidental meetup at a country club when I wasn't even 16 years old yet.
And
if I was 15, he was 27. Yeah.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah. So I went from like the high school lunch table to like partying and bottle service.
And your mom and grandma, they're on board with this.
Oh, yes. Very supportive. Very, very supportive because they like thought that meant I was taken care of. And he was kind of like, everybody back home knew who he was, like, I don't want to say it's like a local celebrity, but everybody back home knew who he was. So it was like prestige to an extent for them, and I think we all, regardless of our relationships, I think we all want to please our parents. And like I shared on the flip side of that, I credit that man with like giving me a safe place to live, giving me exposure to business and because he owned his own business and giving, things that I would have never been exposed to based on my situation. So it's really interesting.
We share that too. This is that's why this was so interesting after we had that conversation, because I know we've been in business together for many years. And obviously I watch your social media and I've noticed some correlation over time, but there are so many things that are so similar to both of our upbringing. I mean, I was of legal age when I met my ex-husband, but I was just barely 19. He was 38. And so a lot of times I look back on it and I go, well, I mean, obviously, what was I thinking? But what were you thinking?
Right.
I mean, I was a child. You were definitely a child. So you end up getting married. Yes. Right?
Yes, for a very brief period. So during this, you were asking what happened. Got a fake ID, young age, went straight down to iconic Chicago downtown nightclubs and did all of the things.
This is probably fun.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, I'm sure
if it wasn't fun, I wouldn't do it. So it's, and I said that on another podcast, there's fun with problems, and then there's just problems. And that was the progression of my, disease there. If it wasn't fun, I wouldn't have done it. That was like the Britney Spears.
Sure, I can imagine it.
Age of things. So like all the celebrities were like out at the clubs and thing. And I think I probably on some level thought that I was one of those people.
Probably at 17, 18, I'm sure you did. That's what we do think. And you're
so
hanging out with them. So.
Like those people were going to clubs at the time and they were exactly the same age as me. So it was like a weird, odd, accepted caveat at the time. It didn't feel like so glaring. Like I look at my children now and my son is 12. You know what I mean? Like I can't imagine in 3 years him dating you.
Right.
Yeah,
I know. It's so once you have your own children, you start thinking about that and you look at them and you go, I can't even believe this. I can't even believe I was doing this and also that other people were supporting it. It's wild.
Or that in 3 years he would be let into a bar, regardless of what a piece of plastic said. You know what I mean? It's just so funny how we shift gears that way. So at some point, there were certain rules that I had about certain things I wouldn't do. My family's sloppy drinkers. They're like sloppy, mean, like blackout drinkers. And I truly believe, I know there's all kinds of schools of thought. That's probably a whole different podcast for somebody that's in the medical field. But I truly believe that it's a genetic disease. I see it maybe in my daughter already, which is a little scary. But my uncle died of alcohol poisoning. My mom died of a lot of things, but indirectly and, as a result of decisions she made, while drinking. And then I full-blown catapulted into another level when I left that relationship. So, I had like this big penthouse apartment by myself, and I was going to do it by myself. And I didn't ask him for anything, because I wanted to be, now I was on like this rebellious streak. So I went from like the goody two-shoe, like I'm going to do everything my family wants me to do and get straight A's, to I don't care, and I'm going to do me, and I'm going to do it by myself. And that lasted. Of
course, that's independent you.
Yes. That didn't end well or last very long. What I found was my sloppy drinking, my solution to my sloppy drinking was cocaine. So once I started
making a little downer, a little upper.
I
keep it going.
Yes, I could stay up longer. So, I was never an everyday drinker, but I was the type of, and everybody has this friend, I feel like. They're like, here we go again. Like you never knew what you were going to get. And I didn't know what I was going to get, I would have every intention of going out to have 1 or 2 drinks. And then 3 days later, I'd wake up, not wake up because I'd still be up. But I'd be like hailing, hailing a cab because I lived in the city of Chicago. Thank God I lived there, by the way, because there was no like drunk driving really happening there.
Cabbing everywhere.
Yes. So getting a cab and my clothes from, like my little sequined halter top from 3 days earlier.
It's like from a movie almost.
Yeah, pretty much. Ironically, again, I have to give credit where it's due. That guy and my mom at the time intervened me because, there were enough signs. I don't, want to bore you with details, but, I wasn't showing up for things. I was lying. I was stealing.
How old were you at this time? Ish.
I want to say my first time they tried for like an intervention was 19.
Oh, so this progressed quickly.
Yeah, I mean, the disease doesn't mess around, at least like with the people around me. Because I've seen people that can like prolong this for years.
I mean, I saw Kennedy's dad relapse and it was within, I talked about this in the podcast. It was 1 second, it was 1 beer. A month later, it was like, he'd come home and he'd be 4 in and have 4 more. And then a month later, he was drinking scotch outside at night at midnight, playing putt-putt golf to AC/DC. And I'm on the phone with my friends. I'm like, this really progressed fast.
Yeah.
Really fast.
It really does. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that I didn't have to, because I've seen people try to get sober after years of damage. I can tell you the damage that I did. So I'd love to tell you I got sober at 19.
So yeah, they intervened. So what did they do?
It was actually a girlfriend of mine that started it and then included the guy and my family. And she was kind of like something along the lines of like, I can either not be friends with you anymore, or I can like involve these people and help. Because at that time, I think I was like his personal assistant. So we're divorced because, you know, I did coke, he cheated, like we pointed fingers and off we went.
Because you were 19.
Yeah, there's that. And that started, you know, I think it was more, I went to one meeting and I was like, I'm not that bad. I'm just going to like figure it out and not put one thing down. You know, I really didn't want to quit drinking. Like that's like part of
sure,
a 20-something culture, you know, like that was like the last option.
Right.
I really just wanted to stop staying up for 3 days without having planned that because, you know, I was like losing jobs, broken relationships, that kind of thing. And so I did like that dance until I was, and this went back and forth. Until I was about 22, I think I hit a wall where like my mom had to like come pull me out of the place that I was living in and be like, you're living back here in the suburbs with me and you're not going anywhere. I thought in my head, when I had this final intervention, it was so funny. I was like, I need to stop at the Gap. And this is something I said. I need to stop at the Gap and get some like plain clothes because I was always going to these nightclubs and it was always
like I need some comfort.
Yes.
If I'm going to lay on the couch and be sad and not drink, I need to have some comfort.
Yeah. In my head, I'm packing to go to like, what do they have on the TV in Malibu? You know, where they have like equine therapy and massages. You know, and this is quite frankly like I'm so messed up from all the like lack of sleep and things that I put in my body that I truly thought that this was, I deserved it. Like I deserved for somebody to spend $50,000-$60,000 to send me to one of those places. And my mom, having been in recovery for a long time, I showed up and there were two people from Alcoholics Anonymous sitting there, a husband and a wife. And I was pissed. I was so mad because they were like, you're going to go to a meeting a day and you're going to do, you know, these things and this is going to be your sponsor. And, you know, back in the Midwest, like the meetings there are like, just like they have them in the movies where it's like, donuts and candy and, you know, the sharing, like it's very like it's very different here. And I'm very grateful for that. And I wish I could tell you I got sober. I didn't. I'd like get 30 days together and then I'd go back out to the city.
It's
and
a lot of people. That's what happens.
Yeah. You know, I was young. And somehow at some point I put 30 days together and I was like, I want to move to Arizona. We had gotten married here, the guy, and I spent time here planning the wedding. And I was like, there's, you know, vitamin D and, you know, it's his problem and I need to get away from them. It's the people, it's, you know, the place. I've caused too much damage here. And when you're 23, you can have an idea on a Friday. And by Monday, like, here I was.
This is
in
true.
Arizona. And I think the only thing I did right when I moved here was I did go to a meeting and meet some people, and then immediately went out to like, what is it, 6? Do you guys remember these bars? 6 and
I was never a big partier,
6
but
or
that's
7,
for different reasons.
Yeah, it's different reasons.
Or same reasons, but
so
different outcome.
Yeah, within like a day, I was out in Old Town, just out, whatever bars. They all have different names. They're the same places. No,
it's the same places, different names.
Yes, but they were really cool back then. Again, you know, just really addicted to like that lifestyle. And I was loaded in 24 hours, you know, and eventually it just came, everybody was cutting me off, you know, back home. And they're like, we moved you, we did this, we did that, like, we're done.
Here comes the cutoff.
By the grace of God or universe, whatever you want to call it, like, I didn't have to like have one of those catastrophic moments.
So what happened?
It was more of like, I'd say, just, you know, a moral, this part, you know, you have these things when you're in addiction that you say you'll never do, or like are the reasons that you're not that bad. Like when I started doing drugs, it would be, I'm never going to buy my own drugs. I'm just going to do them with friends, and then I check that off the list and I make a new one. So I'm like, I'm never gonna, do the drugs by myself, even though I buy them, you know what I mean? Because it's rude to ask people for drugs all the time, and then I checked that off the list and the list went on. And I believe that list would have continued to go on. And I think you and I both have evidence of that based on our familial relationships, had I not reached a point where just one day I woke up and the only thing that changed was like, I said, help me. I don't know what I said help me to. And I was finally willing to like not have my way, and do the things and humble myself and go to these meetings. And, luckily Arizona I think the West Coast is very much more open to like recovery and like self-healing.
We talk about that stuff more for sure.
This was a very like shameful hush hush thing back in the Midwest. So I needed.
Well, and also no one ever leaves those like everybody knows everybody. It's your mom in the town and aunts and uncles. Everybody is right there. West, everybody's family's from somewhere else too. That makes it, and not everyone, but that makes it a little bit easier in a sense. It's not as hush hush. You create different relationships, new relationships with people because your family's in other places.
Yeah. And, then I saw people that were my age, that were still having fun, like laughing, and doing so, going to concerts and not having to drink. And I wanted to learn how to do that, So it, I think a lot of work went into the foundation of that, fast forward. In May, I celebrated 16 years. 14 was big for me because of my mom, right? And I've had like that motivation. We talked about this a little bit. Like, I don't know if I'd still be sober if it wasn't for my mom's experience. So meanwhile, we had like kind of this path that went this way. Meanwhile, my mom, who's the one intervening me, is progressively like spiraling into this alcoholic pit with her significant other, and hers was more like booze and pills. So, she started to have consequences for that, DUIs and, those things became my problem because the two kids that live with her weren't in a position to help with that anymore. So our relationship became transactional in the sense that it was like, you did all these bad things when you were a kid. Now you need
I helped you, so now you help me.
Now you need to fix this. And I think we talked about that a little bit. I did what I could.
For a long time.
Yeah. I think it changed when I had kids of my own because I had to, dedicate the effort there. She would come here with bags and bags of pills. She would be passed out, on Christmas morning saying she was here to visit her grandchild. That was not the case, and it took me years to have to say, no, I'm not going to have you come here anymore based on your condition. And people,
that's a really hard thing to do.
And especially when they're in that state and that disease, and I've been there, that helplessness that they feel at that point, it gets real nasty towards you,
nasty.
And also not okay, not okay. And because in my experience, I had so much guilt and shame for what I had done or not done, that there was probably, I think the first 9 years of my sobriety while my mom was drinking, that I would fly her out for Christmas and, do the things to try to make the amends and make things right. And we never really had that relationship, like I said, to begin with. And it would always be chaos. And that progressively got worse over time. She lost her house that we had since my sister was born. So she's 32.
Our stories are, they correlate so closely. So what happened ultimately with your mom and your relationship?
It came to a head, and I don't think it's an accident. I was pregnant with my daughter. And I used to smoke cigarettes. I become addicted to anything, whatever it is. Yes. So clearly I was pregnant, so I don't do that while I'm pregnant. My mom had asked me to go to the Indian reservation because they're cheaper here and buy her cigarettes and send them to her. And I was like miserable in my first trimester. And like the last thing I wanted to do as a former smoker was like have cigarettes.
You're like, I can't believe you just asked me
Yeah,
this.
I'm like, I don't want to have cigarettes in my hands. I just don't want to. But I did it. And I sent her the cigarettes. And apparently it was the wrong brand.
Oh no, you do not mess that up.
So then she wanted me to go back. So this is where like this argument started. I mean, it's kind of like I say it out loud and it's kind of comical, but it was like very serious at the time. And she had a number of expletives to tell me about, how I thought I was holier than now, and all
I've
of
heard
that.
this before too.
Yes, I'm better than, and I could take my love and light and shove it up my ass.
Understood.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mom.
Yes. So that was the first part of that, and then she popped up again, and I didn't invite her to my baby shower, but she asked me to fly her out for my baby shower.
Sure she did.
Yes. So there was that. And then I think it really came to a head where, she was out of money. Eventually that man she was with, they broke up. Obviously, that was a very unhealthy relationship. He stopped paying for everything. She lost the house. She got public housing, lost that. She got 2 DUIs on the premises, fell and broke her hip while she was drunk, ended up in an assisted living facility that was state funded. Not a very nice place. Went there when I was in Chicago. Not very nice. So she had reached out to me for a Chanel bag that she had given me. Again, this is my family. My mom is literally.
But I understand all of this that you're saying.
Yeah,
just so
she's a glorified homeless person at this time. I don't need to sugarcoat it. That's what she was. She was living on state assistance essentially, and she wanted me to mail her this Chanel bag. So that
probably she could sell it,
wear it. And it was the one, because I'd already sold all of her stuff for her, all the designer stuff that she had gotten during that relationship with that guy so that she could have cash at different times. I helped sell it in my sister's closet here. And I was like, no, I'm not going to give you that. This is a gift that you gave to me. And, she went on her worst of all tirade. And I was like, I am not going to be talked to this way. I'm not exposing my daughter to this. We are done here. That was probably a year and a half. I didn't talk to her. And she, would still try to reach out. I had her blocked from my phone. And then, bless my husband's heart, he really is the best. He would, send her pictures of the baby once the baby came. And kind of give her updates. He played buffer by choice. I did not ask him to do that. I just really couldn't. And my brother and sister were in town for something, and they put her on speakerphone because they were trying to match make up. Does that happen to you, where they try to match make you back together? And they're like, say hi to Mom. And I said hi. And then, there were many medical incidents. But I remember I was at the first real estate event that we had back from COVID, at the first big event. It was up at Greyhawk. And my brother called me and was calling me repeatedly while I was there. And he's texting and said, hey, it's about Mom. Mom's not good. And I unfortunately, it's the boy who cried wolf. I had gotten so many text messages about Mom not being okay that I really didn't take it that seriously. And
it happens.
It was hey, Mom's being put on a ventilator. And I need to make this decision. And I said, you guys were much closer because of, their time together. And I haven't talked to her in a year. I don't feel comfortable making that decision for her, but I trust you, I will support you, whatever your decision is. And, doctor called us and kind of broke down her condition. And what she had was COPD from smoking and pulmonary hypertension in her heart from all of the damage she had done to her body. So she got pneumonia, COVID, who knows? We couldn't visit at the time. So, and even if we would have been able to, we wouldn't have gotten there in time because within, hours of her being put on a ventilator, which was the only way that she would have survived, they called to tell us, she hadn't made it. So there's a lot of conflicted feelings there, because I remember that year I made a post about it.
It's actually my worst fear. I remember your post. I remember
about
your
Mother's
post
Day?
because I didn't know that about, I knew that you were sober, but I didn't know that about your mom. And we'd spent so much time together in the industry. And I remember reading that post and thinking, wow, there's a reason why I feel like we've always connected and we had never talked about it. I'll always remember that post.
Yeah. And I remember my husband that year was like, do you want to call your mom? Like, he's, bless his heart, he's like a very forgiving person, very loving and understanding. And he's like, do you want to call your mom? And I'm like, now I'm on like the boundary train, right? Where I'm like, nope. Mm-hmm. We get on those and I'm like, nope, not doing it. Like, my focus, is these two kids here in front of me. It's Mother's Day for me too, Mm-hmm. And I think you always think that like the next year, you can do those things, and it's pitiful to me because there's so much, like, there was a piece when I got that phone call that she had passed away, and I know my brother and sister took it a lot harder than I did, because she wasn't living anymore.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like that wasn't the way that
she would want to live either. No,
I wouldn't want to. And
it's still tragic.
Yeah,
because of how everything transpired and how her life transpired and where the addiction led her. The ending is tragic, and it's sad because the relationships at the end are not really relationships anymore with those that are your loved ones.
Yeah,
don't have relationships.
No, I think that the disease of addiction and alcoholism is especially, what's the right word that I'm looking for? It's a thief, and that
robs you,
in that sense of who the person is. I've experienced
robs them of their life, and it robs everyone else of a life with them.
Totally, and all the things that come with it. Time, the time that we can't get back, and really, I think that's what shifted for me. Like, my way, maybe it's my justification of it, but my way of coping with that is I just remember my mom telling me all these things, like she always wanted me to pay for her to do them. But she would tell me these things like, I've never been to Sedona. I'd really like to go to Sedona. I've never been to Hawaii. I'm so glad you're going to Hawaii, and I think that probably since then, one thing that I've doubled down on is just like doing the things. Like, if I'm going to be sober and I'm going to live differently, I think one of the gifts that you get as being a parent is you get to hopefully create and facilitate an environment that is different than you grew up with, imperfectly. And there are still times, and I don't know if you get this, there are still times where I'll be in my household and I will like react to my children in a certain way, and I'm like, I am my mom.
Yeah, I hate when that happens.
I'm like, no matter how hard we try, no matter how hard we try, it still happens. But really just doubling down on my experience and my time with them, because that's two things I didn't get.
Right.
I didn't get to have those experiences. Not that I never went on vacation with my mom. She absolutely did those things for us. And we do have good memories. I don't want to take away from those. But really facilitating as much of that in terms of core memories for my children as I can, both from my life perspective, in terms of how I want to, go out eventually, and also what they are left with, in terms of the years ahead.
And I know today too is an ironic day. We talked about this before when we decided on this day, that today is actually your mom's birthday.
Yes, 8855 was my mom's birthday.
8855
was my mom's
Happy
birthday.
birthday!
Happy birthday!
Mom. Happy birthday to your mom.
Yes.
And I know that we talked a little bit too, just kind of before we wrap this up, that there are a lot of people that have reached out to you over the years that you have helped because of you have such a interesting dynamic. And I appreciate you coming on and talking about this too, because there's so much of it deep rooted into the podcast because of my past and the whole reason for the podcast as far as our moms sharing this. And then you also have a very unique perspective being in a space where you were an addict yourself. So when people reach out to you for help or to talk, or if anybody's listening to this right now and struggling with those things, what's the advice that you normally give, or what do you say to them?
Well, I think that's all situational, but I think I wish that I could, give a 60-second video on YouTube of like the progression of my life, the way that I lived my life today is, because I'll go back and speak at meetings and things like that. And as I'm standing up there and, like our designer clothes or whatever it is, I'm like, this is not where I started. Like I was selling that stuff, you know what I mean? So no matter where it is that you're starting, like whatever, I lived the life of my wildest dreams. We just got back from Europe, you know what I mean? Like, and this was all created from the rubble. So I think sometimes what gets people or hangs people up is they think they've created so much damage that they can't start or ever heal or ever recover or ever be forgiven. And I can tell you that I felt all of those things, and like I truly live a life of freedom today.
It'll
like
make me cry a little bit. I have the goosebumps hearing you say that. You think that you can't get out of it from the rubble.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, was it fun? No. Did I have bad credit? Did I have all of the things?
Sure, there was quite a lot of damage.
Yes. Did I have to do years of therapy? Did I have to do, self-discovery work, in 12-step programs? All of those things. Yes. Yeah. But as a result, like, the way that my life looks on the outside matches the way that it is on the inside, which is like a gift that I wish I could give everybody else that I didn't even know that I wanted. It's like, I look happy on social media, and I truly am happy. And on the days I'm not happy, I also post
about happy.
Yeah, I also post about that because like I get to live every day. Like I've seen people like a lot of times in recovery programs, they'll say, it's jails, institutions, or death for, people that, can't get sober. But I think that statement leaves out the people that live in it. Mm-hmm. Like jails, institution, or death are like a stopping point, right? Like living in it, I've watched that. And like, it's one of the most heart-wrenching, frustrating, pitiful things to witness in somebody else, So that's like the biggest gift that I've been given is being able to just live, to live. And
that is the gift.
Right.
To live.
And be present for mostly all of it, good, bad, and different, That's another thing I tell people. I'm like, it doesn't,
because that's living.
I've gotten married, I've gotten divorced, I've had people born, I've had people die. Like I haven't had to drink over any of it. You know what I mean? Like I'm still here.
Freaking bow.
Yes. I think those are the two things is like wherever it is, you can recreate whatever kind of life you ever. I've seen absolute miracles happen, not just in my life, but in other people's lives, when they were willing to do things differently. And just living, the ability to be present is highly underrated. Like people ask me that in the real estate industry, they're like, how do you you're like always they say I'm always out of town. And I'm like, we'll go up north or whatever for a weekend.
That's not true.
It's not true. I wish I was more. But they're like, how do you do I used to hike a lot. My husband and I met hiking. So they'd be like, how do you do all these cool hikes and stuff like that?
Present.
And I'm like, I'm never hungover. Ever.
Yes.
Ever. And it's
I
really,
can get up early. I can do all the things.
It's really, and it's pretty cool though, like from when I got sober, because I got sober when I was 24, to today, recovery, like not drinking is like kind of cool now. It was not.
It is. We're like in the mocktail world now. Like it is cool now. This is good. You started a trend.
I went to Cabo and they had a mocktail.
So trendy.
Yes, had mocktails on the menu. I was like, okay.
Thank you. Wish we would have had those years ago.
Yes, absolutely. So it's definitely it's funny. It's funny and also awesome to see how like society has kind of morphed and like accepted, you know.
Thankfully for that. Mm-hmm. So if anybody should need to reach out to you, how do we find you?
The same way you find anybody these days on Instagram.
And your Instagram is?
So I spell my name a little funky. Thanks, Mom, for that. It's CRYSTLE -Mulzet, MULZET, at Insta or at
and
yeah, whatever they say.
This will be in the link at the bottom of the episode too. So you'll be able to click on it and find her. But if you've had any questions or do need to reach out to Crystle, you can reach out to her on Instagram or through me on youreitgirl as well. And thank you for coming on the show and talking about all of this. Really, I am honored to have you on talking about these topics. And thank you for everything you shared with me in private too. And thank you all for listening. That is You're It Girl.